Community Seva is a local non-profit organization formed right here in the Bay Area with a simple mission to feed the hungry and serve the homelessness. We live in Silicon Valley, one of the fifth largest economy in the world. And it's hard to believe that homelessness even lives here.
So today we're making pasta, meatballs, and grilled veggies, bread rolls, and we're gonna have strawberries for dessert. Cooking for 300 people today for this shelter here, and also we will be sending food to Sunnyvale.
We have 20-pound bags of potatoes, and we have 10 pounds of carrots, 10 pounds of broccoli, and about 20 pounds of peppers. We are going to be cooking about 40 pounds of pasta.
Community Seva has been actively working with homeless advocates in reaching out to various encampments like this one in Roosevelt Park. These homeless people really need help, and we come here, we help them to clean their encampments and serve them food, and also give them backpacks and also tents. Community Seva started its shower Seva exactly a year ago. Every third Sunday of the month, we provide hot shower and laundry facility to the homeless people in downtown San Jose. And to date, we have given shower and laundry facility to close to more than 400 homeless individuals. And when they come and take shower, they also get to eat a hot breakfast, and they also get a winter backpacks with blankets, towel, socks, beanie, gloves, and rain ponchos.
I'm Mary McCall, one of the board members here at Front Door Communities. We are so pleased to be able to host Community Seva the third Saturday of each month. And in addition, happy that they're going to help us when the shower ban is here on Mondays and Fridays. So thank you, Community Seva.
Idea behind having this centralized kitchen will enable us to cook and serve more homeless people, because so much of hunger is out in the community, and we could serve in one go 200 additional meals to the homeless people. And this could not have been possible without the support of City of San Jose, the Park and Recreation team, and few organizations who gave us the grant.
Here is what we plan to do for the next 1 year. We are planning to secure a larger commercial kitchen to cook and serve more homeless individuals and also to low-income senior citizens. We plan to increase shower seva from once a month to 9 times a month. We plan to increase winter backpack giveaways from 1,000 to 2,000 per year to support more overnight warming centers and encampments. From the current 25,000 meals served per year, we plan to serve additional 10,000 meals.
You guys' organization is incredible. Every time you guys come here, you come here with smiles and, and I get choked up over it because it really means something to me. You know what I mean? Because you guys take your time and your money and your trouble to come here and do this for us. You know what I mean? And you guys are incredible. I can't say enough, thank you guys enough for what you guys do for us.
I would now like to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Pastor Scott Wagers. Pastor Scott is a senior pastor and founder of Chum Deliverance Ministry. He has been a grassroots homeless organizer in San Jose for over 25 years. He earned his BA and MA in sociology at San Jose State University, writing his master's thesis on the structural causes of homelessness in America. In 1977, Pastor Scott and Chum collaborated with First Christina Church to open the church as a homeless family shelter. It successfully defied city efforts to shut its doors and then helped create CHAP and Progress, pilot housing programs for the homeless. Pastor Scott is a recipient of many community and academic achievement awards. Please welcome Pastor Scott.
It's always good to see your picture on the big screen, right? Reminds you that Photoshop does wonders. Take it down. Brother Nathan, thank you for the invitation. It's good to see you all here. I know we're running behind. When you tell a preacher he's got 5 minutes, he's like, where do I go with that? No, but honestly, brothers and sisters, I want to tell you that I've been on the front lines for 25 years dealing with the homeless crisis. And unequivocally speaking, the problem is greater now than it's ever been. So your support, everything you give, even the thoughts you think, the prayers you send matter. So the crisis in Silicon Valley, everybody knows about it, but the numbers are just staggering. Listen to the numbers. 6,200 people are homeless in San Jose. 10,000 nearly are homeless in the county. 158 people died on the streets last year, some of whom us advocates know. So the picture is grim, but also there's hope, because we live in the wealthiest nation, in the wealthiest region, one of them in the world. You've got to remember that. Martin Luther King said, America has the resources to end poverty. The question is, does it have the will? So today you're going to hear from advocates, people, and a brother that lives actually on the streets. But I want you to know that the problem is growing along the creeks. I go out with the police department now. We go out 3 times a week, and you see people living in fourth world conditions. And when you're middle class or upper middle class, maybe you're insulated from that reality, but people are literally living in fourth world conditions along a creek without safe, habitation or sanitation. There's diseases that break out in homeless camps. The picture, again, it's startling And that's why I stay out there on the front line, because to see it up close and personal, it grips you. And you have two choices. You can be afraid, and you can back away, and you can try to build insulation between you and your brother and sister, or you can say, I'm going to make a difference. And I know that's what Brother Nathan and Community Seva is about. When I met Nathan a couple of years ago at the health fair, you know, he drew me in because I know he's real, and I know he cares individually about the people. And that is something in dealing with homelessness you have to do. You have to see these are children of God. These are people. These are human beings, and they have lives and they have stories. And everything, listen what I'm going to say now. Everything you do for them matters. Every piece of food you give them, every time you give them a hug or anything, they're in survival mode. And I thank God I am not in survival mode. But when you're in survival mode, everything matters, because people ask me, I've been doing this a long time, they say, does it really make a difference? Think about what you're asking. Or the homeless want to be homeless. Think about what you're saying. I've never met anybody that says, I want to live like this, and I've never met anyone out there in 30 years that doesn't appreciate. See, that's a misconception. Come with me or Nathan, come out and individually, yeah, the people are jaded, but they're incredibly gracious and incredibly savvy given their circumstances. That's why I stay there. But today, when I see this many people that I know you all paid to be here, most people pay not to come hear me speak, but to shut me up. Right, Nathan? So you're making a difference. And keep supporting Community Seva. Keep supporting the grassroots efforts that are out there. Backpacks, hygiene kits, you know, again, food. On the front line is where the battle is going to be won or lost. There are 2 districts in San Jose, and you can just come with me or Nathan. You can walk the creek. There's 3,000 people between 2 districts living. That's half the homeless right there in 2 districts. So, like I said, this is not complicated. If you think about it rationally, the homeless are houseless, and they need habitation. And I can't get into it, I don't have the time, we'll get into it on the panel, but there are complex social, political, and economic forces that created what you know as homelessness today. But don't leave here thinking, well, you know, there's a lot of people that make bad choices, and they end up on the street, and they deserve to die out there. That's just not logical to me. I studied this issue. It's complicated in the forces that created it, but the solution to it is not that hard. You can take the hardest core person, and they've tried this in different cities, off the creek, out of shelters, and put them into housing. They will change. That's been proven over and over again. Yes, they need services. Yes, they need support. They will change. You save their lives. On my Facebook, I post every story of every person that gets a housing voucher. It saves their lives. You're not enabling people because that's a myth. You don't enable people when you help them survive. If you're hungry, you need food. If you're naked, you need clothing. And if you're devoid of a house, you need housing. That's not enabling. So don't let that myth stop you from being generous and doing what your heart tells you to do. So thank you for having me. We're going to have a panel discussion in a minute, and we'll go into depth on some very important questions. But bless you all, and thank you for having me.
Pastor Scott, thank you for that inspiring keynote. It's my pleasure to now introduce to you our moderator for the panel discussion, Mr. Yogi Chugh. Mr. Chugh is a managing director for S5 Advisory, Inc. He has been involved in community service and local community issues for over 3 decades. He currently serves as a commissioner on the Fremont Economic Development Commission, an advisory board member for Drivers for Survivors, and an associate board member for Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs. He's a co-host of an award-winning weekly radio talk show, The Power Hour, where they tackle grappling issues of the day weaved in with immigrant stories, events, and community organizations making a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Yogi Chugh. The stage is yours, Yogi.
Good afternoon, all of you. Just looking at this room full of people holds a sense of admiration for the fact that you are here today to come back and support something so deep and so meaningful. Before we bring on our panel, there's a quick slide that we would like to bring your attention to. And one of the conversations about this discussion, Pastor spoke about this, about the conversation about homelessness. It is definitely a conversation that needs to happen, and if you have your booklets in your hand, I would direct your page to this slide. But it's a very powerful, powerful slide, and one that I would like to ask that you indulge your time for a brief few moments, because today the goal is to come and let everybody know about homelessness and what it means to address the needs of our local communities. Look at the census population. The trend has gone up from 2007, where 7,202. It is now up to 9,706 people. Age, the pastor talked about that. Under 18, 8%. 17% is 18 to 24. 75% is over the age of 25. This is the moral imperative of our generation. And we have an obligation to come back and ensure it is addressed. Primary events or conditions that lead to homelessness. This will relate to many of you. Not only may have been something you felt on a personal level, but it could have been something that you know of a friend, a child, a student, a relative, or a neighbor. Lost a job, alcohol or drug use, divorce, separation, breakup, eviction, argument with a family or friend, incarceration. What are the obstacles to permanent housing? 66% could not afford their rent. 56% no job or income, 40% no housing available, 35% no money for moving cost. And the duration of current episodes of homelessness, less than 30 days, it's 6%, 1 to 11, 27%, 67%, more than a year. What does the demographic make of homelessness? Homelessness, sadly, does not belong to a certain group of people. It transcends economic boundaries. It transcends race. It transcends age. 44% white Caucasian, 24% multiracial, 19% Black, 8% American Indian or Alaskan Native. It is a moral imperative. It is a conversation that has to be had, a conversation that we hope will help understand the very notion of what homelessness is. I struggled with the definition of homelessness, but today as we have this conversation, we're going to talk about this. We're going to come into your hearts, we're going to come into your soul, we're going to come into your minds. It is truly an honor and a privilege now to introduce our panelists. They will be doing their own self-introductions briefly, but I'm going to call each one of them on the stage today. Pastor Scott Wager, you heard from him a few moments ago. Pastor Scott Wagers, please join us on this august podium and dais. Next will be Sean Cartwright. Sean may need a little bit of assistance with her crutches, but she is absolutely somebody who was motivated and fired up to be a part of this conversation today. And as we give Sean the chance to walk up slowly, I don't know if I should call him a friend, a community leader, or an inspirer or somebody who's passionate about what he does. But Nathan, please join us on this panel discussion. And then I'm going to also request and ask Jerome to be a part of our dialogue today about homelessness. We're going to have a conversation today. Some of it will be personal, some of it will be observation, but this is the opportunity for us to have a dialogue. Pastor Scott, the introduction for you was done, so we can then move on to Sean. Sean, brief few seconds, a little bit about Sean. Let this group know who Sean is.
If you're an elected leader, you think I'm just kind of like a pain in the butt because I'm always dragging you around and saying, hey, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? But I feel called to this because I live downtown where the vast majority of unhoused people are. I'm also conveniently located a block from City Hall, which I think that they love. But I'm right there where all the unhoused people are. And so I feel like I can walk out my door and ignore them and be irritated at people literally bathing in my front yard, or I can help people. And I feel like, we're our brother's keeper. So I can't ignore people who are hungry and dirty and need help. And it started when I was a teenager. I lived in a town where there was a woman that the police went to roust because people had complained that she smelled, so the police wanted to go get rid of her. And when they went to go roust her, they found out that she had been dead so long she was decomposing. And this was on the main street of town. So my friends and I realized that there was a problem in town and nobody cared about it. And we started doing performances at our college and raising money and then going and using that money to feed unhoused people in the middle of the night. So we tucked the food that we made inside their baskets and stuff like that. So that's what we started when I was a teenager, and I guess it became a thing because that's what I've done the rest of my life.
Wonderful, thank you, Juan. Jerome, your own introduction and your sense of this conversation about homelessness.
My name is Jerome Shaw, and I am extremely afraid to be up here right now. Yeah, I've been homeless. It says in the brochure for like 3.5 years. I currently stay in a shelter in Sunnyvale, run by Home First. I originally became homeless in 2013 when I lived in West San Jose because I have a son who's on the autism spectrum. So my son was going to school in the Cupertino School District because they have a really good school district because they always have money. So my son was going to school in the Cupertino School District, and I was living in West San Jose, but my fourplex apartment complex was bought by a new owner, and I was forced out because I always kept my apartment clean and nice, and so it was the best unit out of all the four. So basically, he moved into that unit, and I was forced out. So when I became homeless in 2013, summer of 2013, because I was forced out in May of 2013, I was living in hotels because my son had summer school still that summer coming up. So I, stayed in hotels. I didn't have a vehicle, so I would rent like Zip cars. Now they have Uber. They didn't have Uber back then, I don't believe. I was renting Zip cars to run my son back and forth to school while we rented hotels all across San Jose. I was unable to get another apartment because I was unemployed at the time. And it's hard, even though my unemployment covered my rent, it's hard to get another apartment when you don't have a real source of income that someone can verify. So in 2013 to 2014, I kind of couch surfed with friends and things like that, and I was able to get employment at the end of 2013. And I was able to get another apartment in West San Jose, so my son was able to go to school there again. But in 2015, mid-2015, I had a mental health breakdown, and so I lost my housing, I lost my son, and I lost my employment all at the same time. And due to my mental health issues, I was unable to work for a couple of years, and so I lived out of my car for a while, didn't pay the registration. It was at a VTA parking lot. I left it there one day and then it got towed away. And I couldn't afford to get it out of the impoundment. So I lost my vehicle then. And so I was on the streets for a while. I stayed in places that were like, open 24 hours. I would go to McDonald's a lot, or I would ride the buses, to go to sleep and things like that. And I eventually was able to get into a mental health program run by Home First in one of their shelters. And that was the first time I was in the shelter. I timed out there. I think it was like a 3-month program. And then I was back out on the streets and ended up going to another shelter called MSI, run by Life Moves. And so in that shelter, I timed out again. They have shelters aren't meant to be permanent supportive housing, so you have time limits. You can't just stay there, indefinitely. And so I kept timing out because I was unable to work, and so I was unable to get a job.
Jeremy, I'm going to ask you a few more questions, but the framework of this conversation about what got into the system and how you got this is very inspiring. Hold your thoughts for just a few moments,
Okay.
Because we want to continue this conversation.
Oh, I apologize.
No, it's not that at all. I think that the conversation about Jerome and all of that. See, in the panel discussion, I've always felt that it's important to understand the story of the person. Because once you understand the story of the person, it's something you can relate to. And the conversation about is the stories that you're going to hear, the conversation pieces, I can assure you, you'll be able to relate it to in some form or shape. So Jerome, inspiring story. Thank you for opening up your own journey as a part of that. And Nathan, as we begin this dialogue, you don't need a whole lot of introduction, but certainly Nathan is a corporate leader. A lot of people just think community Seva is his full-time gig, but Nathan has continued to really focus on Silicon Valley and really becoming an extraordinary person who understands the notion of technology. I often wonder, there's 24 hours in a day. How does Nathan spread it between community Seva, family, and work?
Definitely, I know in the audience here don't need my introduction because we have seen enough time in the video. Already my pictures are printed on the brochure. I think I'm going to skip the introduction about myself, but I want to thank all three of you. Hats off to you for what you do. I'm proud to call you all my brothers and sisters, and I'm so blessed that I know you, and thank you for being here. So let's continue the conversation more deep into it. Thank you.
Pastor Scott, when you spoke here, it was inspiring the fact notion. You talked about a chance meeting with Nathan, and then how the work that you started to watch about community Seva. But the question about homelessness, often reading up on that, you find out that there are various reasons why people enter into it. But I'd like you to speak a little bit about the barriers that prevent people from sometimes getting out of homelessness. Can you speak to that, Pastor?
That's a great question. And, when I studied homelessness as a graduate student, unequivocally, the experts, quote unquote, said the lack of housing. In the 80s, Ronald Reagan was president of the United States. Do you guys know who Ronald Reagan is? But he cut the housing budget $63 billion. And then suddenly, even in San Jose, I wasn't here in the 80s, but tent cities, like you see now, but smaller, started to explode on the streets. So again, think logically. That's a direct cause. See, there's correlation and there's cause. What causes, like Sean says, it's not homelessness, it's houselessness. Those big forces create people being on the street, right? But once they get on the street, watch, this is really important. When I was doing graduate work, there was a Stanford epidemiologist studied homelessness. She said that drug addiction, mental health issues, they're correlated with homelessness, but they're not causing homelessness. Okay? Think about what I'm saying. There are countries in the world where there's no homeless people because housing is a right. See? So when people become homeless, every issue they have is exacerbated manyfold, and they begin to be stuck on the streets. There's a guy named Golden Wolf that was a member of my church 25 years, and he became more severely mentally handicapped as the years went on. Finally, his Section 8 housing came in. I'll be brief. And he got off the streets. He still comes to church. I'll probably see him later today. His life was saved, period. He's got a lot of mental health issues, but the housing saved him. So again, the point I'm trying to make is that don't confuse cause and correlation. When people end up on the streets, any of us on the street, if I'm on the street for a week, I'd turn into somebody worse than I already am. But think about that. So that's not causing homelessness. There's much bigger forces at work causing homelessness. The economy, stupid, right? The cost of housing. Who can afford $4,200 for an apartment? I started the Student Homeless Alliance at San Jose State because I wanted to help the homeless. Now there's 4,200 students at San Jose State that are homeless.
Wow. Staggering numbers, Pastor. Sean, your observations about the barriers that are imposed once somebody enters into homelessness. What prevents them from getting out of the vicious cycle of homelessness?
Well, one of the things I wanted to follow up on what Pastor Scott said is with the drug addiction, a lot of women end up having to do drugs once they get on the streets because you do the drugs to stay up all night so that you don't end up falling prey to the predators at night. Many of the women do drugs to stay up so that they don't end up getting raped. The majority of women who are on the streets have been raped at least once. So doing the drugs is a self-defense mechanism. And so then that becomes a problem because I end up on the streets and then I end up doing the drugs to stay safe, and now I'm a drug addict. So now how do I not only get off the streets, but treat my drug addiction and then treat all the trauma that I've been through being on the streets? And then maybe the trauma that I'd already experienced, that caused me to end up on the streets. There's a woman that I remember very clearly who, from Willow Glen, and I like pointing that out because they don't like homeless people, but from Willow Glen, who literally ran out of her house. She was a domestic violence victim, and she was being abused, and she just literally ran out of her house. That was like the last day she was abused. But all she had was what was on her body. And she ended up becoming abused, or she ended up becoming unhoused. So now she's on the streets with just, the t-shirt and jeans that she had, and she had nothing else. So now she's a victim in the way of who's going to help her. Is it going to be somebody who's really nice, or is it going to be somebody who's pretending to be nice and is then going to abuse her later? But many of the barriers are, if you're trying to get drug treatment, you call and you have to actually win the lottery that day to be able to get into drug treatment. If it's domestic violence, there's only 59 domestic violence shelter beds available at any night in the county. If you're a family, there's only 65 family shelter beds at any time in the county. So there's a lot of reasons. And then if you're a pregnant, unhoused woman, most unhoused women won't go to a shelter because they can't take their partner with them. So there's a lot of these really common barriers that people can't or won't go to shelters, or there isn't space for them, or whatever it might be. And so it's just so many barriers that really, honestly, could be taken down with a simple vote.
That's impressive. And you talked about these big problems, and certainly it's a process, but a meal could go a long way in helping somebody at Community Seva. A meal, self-esteem, hygiene, things that could just make a big impact. Would you agree that it's little things such as that?
It's actually little things, and actually the thing that I see most at Community Seva is the humanity. So even though you might just be giving out a backpack or a shower or a meal, it's the humanity that you see. There's other people that serve meals all around the city or the county, and a lot of it's but Community Seva, and it always makes me giggle sometimes. People are like, "Hi, here you go. Here's your food. Here's your backpack. How you doing?" It's like Disneyland, and that goes a long way because unhoused people are invisible. They have no dignity, and nobody ever wants to see them or make eye contact. And Community Seva always goes out of the way to make that eye contact, to say, like, I see you. How are you doing? I am here for you. And to me, that is important.
And you know what? You should applaud because she was talking about many of you, because you make this experience of serving such an honorable way. One of the things that, Sean, somebody mentioned to me a long time ago, that homelessness is a combination of vicious circumstances And you talked about the barriers of how you cannot get out. But you mentioned the importance of a meal, the importance of a shower, a hygiene kit, self-esteem. A professor in college, the only thing I remember about my class in sociology was, if you uplift and give somebody a hand, you'd be surprised at what you can do. So Community Seva volunteers, board, all the sponsors, advisory board, donors and prospective donors, this is the beauty about Community Seva. And thank you so much for speaking to that, because the simplicity of a meal and the simplicity of a handshake sometimes goes unnoticed. Jerome, you were talking about mental illness, and I'm going to talk to Nathan about this because of a culmination of things, and I want to get his perspective as well. But you talked about mental health, and you lost a job, you lost a home, you lost a child. At a time when you needed the most help, it seemed like the world gave up on you.
I felt like the world gave up on me, actually, and I didn't know actually where to go for help. When you become like suddenly homeless, you really don't actually know what resources are out there, and it was hard to find resources, and so I actually found resources through individuals that I knew, and they gave me the direction to go. About the meals, I actually had that exact meal that they were fixing last night, and it's actually delicious. Like, it's like the best. Everyone loves when Community Seva comes because they actually serve good food. And so it is. It's great.
That's very nice of you. Certainly, it means a lot when somebody comes back and just for a brief moment acknowledges that. So the support that you got in the community and the meals, you think made a difference, helped you to get to where you are today?
It definitely did, because I have one of those backpacks. Actually, I have two of those backpacks. And I've used the hygiene kits, and I've washed my clothes, and the mobile laundry and everything like that. And it helps you, when you feel like hygiene is very important. Hygiene is very important to me, and it's difficult when you cannot maintain your standard of hygiene just because you don't have access to, the facilities to do that. I've gone to, hospitals. Hospitals are always clean, so I always go to hospitals to use like their bathroom and to like wash up and things like that. But it's difficult, and it actually brings you down when you can't maintain your level of hygiene, because it's like the most important thing. It's like when you sit down next to someone on the bus, you don't want to be that guy that everyone's like, oh, this guy needs the shower.
That's right.
And so I think being at the shelters, I was able, because I've been out in the streets, but in the shelter, Nathan, they also deliver hygiene kits and backpacks and emergency kits also. It's not just, to the people that are actually out on the streets and in encampments. They deliver it to everyone who's unhoused. And so I was able to take advantage of that and obtain those services.
Well, Pastor talked about the issues of homelessness and his involvement early on. Sean, you talked a little bit about the barriers. You talked about how dangerous it is at nights and how the whole complexity of being able to extend a helping hand helps people in a way that one can never fathom. Jerome, you talked a little bit about the mental health. You talked about your own viciousness of the system, but you survived and you came through, and you're still understanding how you can now help others as well. Nathan, hearing all of this from a Community Seva standpoint has got to be pretty inspiring for all the things that you're doing right now. Did you ever think that when you first started that all of this was going to come to life and you're going to start to make a profound impact? Maybe small, but big, but larger? What's your thoughts?
It's making me choke. That's for sure. But I really want to applaud and thank you so much for all three of you for all the kind words you have shown today on Community Seva. And another really want to thank you, because without all three of your support, I don't think so we would have done what we are doing today.
because you guys are, Sean, any night you call me, I call you, we are there and you help us to do it. And that's one of the things which Community Seva is really, really, there's no barrier for us. There is no barrier, absolutely no barrier, because we extend our arms to partner with every homeless advocates, front door communities where we are partnering for shower. We want collaboration. We want partnership, because Community Seva, 6 years ago when it started, never thought that I'll be sitting here and talking and I'll have amazing 400 plus and 2,000 volunteers and supporters going to be behind my back. Absolutely not. I'm really my hats off and kudos to all of you for standing behind me. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Thank you, Nathan. Sean, and then I'm going to ask the pastor to respond to this question as well. We showed a slide, right? We showed the different age groups of people. But in your line of work, you're an advocate for homelessness, children and women. One would think that they're more vulnerable sometimes. Is that your observation as well?
Absolutely. The two youngest people to die on the streets last year were a 1-month-old baby and a 4-month-old baby. And the two oldest people to die on the streets last year were 88 and 92. With women, they're more vulnerable because of domestic violence, because of rape, and several other issues. And a lot of times with women, because they do the drugs to stay up all night, because they experience such trauma, because they experience such rape, there's a lot of mental illness that goes along with that as a response. And there's just not enough treatment centers for that. There's not enough drug treatment centers, there's not enough domestic violence shelter beds. And also at the domestic violence shelters, a lot of women have dogs, and they have it as somebody to love and protect you, but also that dog's gonna bark if somebody comes near your tent. And none of the domestic violence shelters let you take your dog with you to the domestic violence shelter. The dog goes to a shelter and you go to a shelter, but you can't go together. And that's a problem. But with a lot of women, once you get into a shelter, it becomes a problem too, because a lot of women develop a very hard personality, a very, or they don't bathe. And the reason that they don't bathe is because it keeps men away. And women develop like a split personality because the angry, mean person keeps people away too. And then once they're in a safer area, like a shelter, they have a hard time letting that other personality go to lower their defenses and things like that. And there's just not enough treatment for that. It's also hard because of families. There's not enough family shelters. And women and families have a hard time because they're afraid to take their children to shelters because they're afraid that they're gonna get taken away, that CPS is gonna be called. And that's a whole other way to victimize families. Because if you wanted to control me and my family, then you would just say, if you don't do this, I'm gonna call CPS on you. So there's just a lot of ways that women can be controlled and threatened and endangered. And also if you're undocumented, that adds a whole other layer to this whole thing. There's wage theft that happens in the unhoused community, because what are you gonna do about it? You don't have any control over it. So there's a lot of things that happen, particularly with women. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that once women are addicted, it's just so hard for them to get off of it because it's just such a coping mechanism after a while.
Got it. Pastor, real quickly, if you can just, real quickly, as somebody in your ministry, you're seeing this a lot.
Oh, every day. And what Sean is saying is so true. I was assigned by the chief of police to go out with the street crimes division hired by the water district. But you talk about misconception. This squadron that I'm actually de facto the chaplain of, they decriminalize these camps. They take the guns and drugs out, right? But what Sean is saying is absolutely true. Once a predatory man is removed, and by the way, he is ticketed and goes right back to the camp. But there are, the sergeant sent me on Friday, and Nathan met them, and Community Seva, you all gave him backpacks, a woman with 2 children that the sergeant referred to me, who out there in a tent, nowhere to go, the police have no answer. Again, they're out there trying to get drugs and guns out of the camps, but They send them to us. And then I sent them to Nathan. They were given backpacks, etc. But the idea that the homeless are criminals, I can tell you, I've been on that outreach since it began about 2 months ago. Homeless are not that many criminals on the street. It's a lot of innocent victims, and that's where the problem is. We're giving money to the police to go into camps. You know what they find? A few people that are the bad guys. But you find many, especially the women with children, lost. Nowhere to go, and there still was nowhere for that woman to go. So Sean nailed that.
That's awesome. And thank you for sharing those conversations. Jerome, real quickly, a personal story that you could share with somebody real quickly, maybe 30 seconds, a story that made a profound difference, and you said, wow, on the street.
Let me think. So I think before I got into the shelters, and I was just on the streets, I saw a lot of people who, I don't know, that people usually see every day that are homeless, that, maybe they're drug addicts, or maybe they have some type of, disability or mental health issue. And I was waiting at the bus stop, one day with a guy, and he was homeless, and he's like, do you have any spare change? He's like, I'm homeless. I'm like, well, I'm homeless also, And he looks at me and he's like, you don't look like you're homeless. I'm like, well, what does a homeless person look like? And like, he didn't have an answer to that. And I didn't have an answer to that either. It's just like, I'm just a regular person trying to make it day by day. I just happen to be unhoused. I'm not, not illiterate. I'm not dumb. I mean, I have goals. I actually have a job now, and I'm very proud of it. I'm in the sheet metals union, so support your local unions, everyone. And so you don't know what a homeless person looks like, and it's kind of, bad for people to have, judgments and misconceptions about, the homeless community.
That's awesome. Jerome, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pose this question to all four of you, and we're almost down to the tail end of this. And this is where the question comes down to where, what's the word, where the rubber meets the metal, or the metal meets the rubber, or let's get to the point where it gets to where we need to be at. How do you think, in a world in which there's never enough money for anyone, how do individuals, youth, or a family member do to make a difference in addressing and alleviating this question about the basic things, a meal, self-esteem, giving them a helping hand? How do we make a difference? What would you say is that one thing that you think somebody can do to make a difference? Pastor.
You have to, look, you can't, Martin Luther King used to give great speeches, one of the greatest speech makers in history. You can't thingify any person from any race, from any background, period. The homeless are thingified. We don't look at them, a lot of our culture does not look at them as human. And it's understandable, seriously, being honest. We have our prejudices, right? But you have to make a human connection. And the power of what we're talking about up here in demythologizing the homeless is to make the human connection. Everybody on the street has a story. Everybody's someone's child or brother or mother out there. And when you make that human connection, especially what Community Seva is doing, because the front line is where the battle will always be won or lost. And it begins with humanizing people. I mean, I don't care what you say about me, but my whole life I grew up in the South. I left the South because of the bigotry in the South. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in some people are better than other people. So if that's true, and I'm a Christian pastor, but I believe all people are equal, and that includes the houseless. So dignity and treating people with absolute respect transforms people. It always will. It's always going to be true. That's right. Every culture, every class of people. And we're having trouble doing that. Trust me, because people just don't, they're afraid. And so my job, I feel, and Sean and the other advocates, and Nathan for sure. Nathan is such a kind, engaging man that starts everything, the change of everything starts there.
Thank you, Pastor. Sean, your brief comments as well.
Mine is a little bit similar. Mine is empathy. And there is no more empathetic group of people than homeless people. And if we could emulate them, I think that would be great. If you give an unhoused person like say like a big foot-long Subway sandwich, they will ask you, can I share with my friends? And they will immediately call other people over. I have gone to an unhoused camp with Nathan and given away a bunch of blankets. And then I've gone back a couple days later and said, do you guys need anything else? And they're like, yeah, we need blankets. I'm like, why do you need blankets? They're like, because the other camp got flooded and we gave them ours. You know, if we could emulate unhoused people and their empathy, then this world would be an amazing place. And I just wanted to digress for a second. There's been a bunch of times that I have called Nathan and said, this camp got flooded. Can we get more tarps to them? Yes. Nathan, these people have everything taken away. They need tents tonight. And he's met me in a parking lot with a tent. So it's more than that. It is just calling him with an emergency and him being like, okay, what time?
Bravo. Jerome, 30 seconds about what a child, a family member can do to address the question of homelessness in our local communities.
I'm gonna dovetail off of her comments. So, but mine are, you know, I want people to have empathy and understanding of like mental health issues that individuals might have. It's sometimes you feel like it has to be like present and obvious, and a lot of times it's not. You know, there's a lot of people that are depressed, that are anxious, that are, you know, bipolar, that are out there, and their mental health issues aren't being addressed, and that's why they're out there. And that's one of the things that I want people to understand, that, or have empathy and understanding about.
That's awesome.
You know, to understand that.
Nathan, one of the things about the dietary considerations, Community Seva spends a considerable amount of time on dietary stuff, right? And we're gonna wrap this up after that. So dietary is a big consideration for Community Seva?
Very much. It's a very big concern, and that's one of the reasons we have a nutritionist in our team. And we work with our core volunteer and a nutritionist together plan. A meal is not just a meal. It's a very healthy, nutritious, hot, delicious, personally cooked with love. That's what we serve.
That's awesome. Nathan, thank you so much. We've had a great discussion and a great dialogue. One of the key things is a question often comes up in a lot of these rooms in which we have a lot of South Asians. You know, I like to give a little bit of money back to India. Nothing wrong with that. I'm proud to support a lot of the things back in India. But somebody told me not too long ago and came back and said, God giveth to those that he believes can give. And give not only to India, but invest a little bit in our local communities. The feeling is gratifying knowing that you're touching communities. And let's not all forget that the immigrant story when we first came here was a humbling story. A story where we were sometimes fearful of whether rent could be made or not. I'm sure that some of you may have dealt with that. Maybe some of you never dealt with that. But let's walk away today with this conversation about the fact that in the 21st century, the question about homelessness is going to be a question that's going to come back and form the dialogue and the discussion, not only at tables, but at households as well. I say the moral imperative, because there is no question about morality when it comes to serving those that are most vulnerable. That's in our DNA. Pastor, Sean, Jerome, Nathan, thank you so much for sharing just a tad bit more, to let a community know what they knew, but sometimes it just has to be reinforced. And Nathan, we're going to tell the story. We're going to keep on telling the story. A big round of applause for our panelists.